Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Chargers Analytics with Arjun. It's been a minute. It's been, a couple of weeks since I've put out my last episode, but we're back. We got a very, very special topic that I've been planning to do for a while now, especially since last off season. But I thought it would be better to do it this off season now that we have a little bit more information and we have a little bit more knowledge about the topic at hand, which is Tom Telesco. So today we're going to just be giving kind of like an analytical view of Tom Telesco. This is not me going to be just straight bashing on him. This is not me going to be just giving him all the praise in the world. The way I wanted to approach this video is as if I'm an owner and Tom Telesco is my GM, right? So I'm Spanos. Telesco's the GM. I'm evaluating Telesco, seeing whether, what he's done in his tenure and, whether it's fair or not to keep him or let him go. And pretend like I'm consulting like PFF as a consulting company, seeing, what has Telesco done in his tenure and in his 9 years as Chargers GM. So let's just get straight into the facts. Telesco's been the GM since 2013. And since that time, he's had a grand total of 2 playoff wins. Now, that isn't good. 2 playoff wins in 9 years is definitely not how you want your GM tenure to be. Most GMs don't get to the third head coach. These are all facts that you guys know. So the points I'm going to be bringing up today mainly speak to the jobs that a general manager usually has, which is the drafts, free agency, and then trades. So those are the 3 concepts I'm going to be covering. And we're going to start off with the draft, and we're going to be talking a little bit about what Telesco has done in the draft as the GM of the Chargers. So if you don't have a PFF subscription, I'd highly recommend it. I know you guys have this sort of bias towards PFF because of, some of the Justin Herbert takes they were putting up before the draft and during his rookie season. They've come around. Like PFF, I work there and I'm an intern there. Like the main thing we try to do is create opinions or takes based on data that we have. And, the data wasn't too kind to Justin Herbert before the draft. So whatever bias you have, leave it out. I'd highly recommend getting a PFF subscription, not only for the data that they have, but for the content and the type of articles that you get access to. So this article was written by Timo Risky, one of the smartest guys that we have here at PFF. And we're just going to be looking at historical draft success for all 32 NFL teams. Now, historical really only means going back to 2019, because that's kind of like you see like the recency draft success that teams have. And that's what we're going to be using today. So Timo, basically what he did in this graph that I have up on my screen is he looked at the total WAR, which is wins above replacement. So if you're like a baseball guy, you kind of understand like WAR is like how much better are you, or how much better a player is than a replacement level player. So we're using the total WAR gained by non-quarterbacks drafted since 2019 over, their last since 2019, pretty much. So this graph is pretty much isolating the Chargers drafts from 2019 to 2021 outside of Justin Herbert. So Justin Herbert is not pictured. His WAR is not included in this graph. And man, the Chargers have had the second worst total WAR gained from their draft pick since 2019. Now, look, I understand, and I'm going to be talking about it in a minute. Just give me a second. I understand Justin Herbert is not included in this graphic, but this is one of the best, like most probably accurate representations of how bad the Chargers have drafted outside of Justin Herbert. Just absolutely no production has come from the 2019 or 2020 rookie class outside of the quarterback position. Now, if we're being honest, like you can look, the Chargers have gained probably approximately like 0.3, 0.35 wins above replacement from their non-quarterback position players drafted in 2019 through 2021. Like I'm pretty sure most of that, and I can speak to it, like most of that comes from Rashawn Slater and Asante Samuel Jr. So from 2019 to 2020, we probably added 0 wins through the draft. That's just putting it bluntly. The 2019 and 2020 class will probably go down as the worst in Chargers franchise history, or at least of the past decade or the century, outside of Justin Herbert. Now, yes, Justin Herbert is important. Justin Herbert, he makes the Chargers drafts better. So you can see here that because of Justin Herbert, the Chargers gained the most WAR above expectation based on their draft pick and their draft value. So you can see like this blue triangle is Justin Herbert's WAR above expectation, which is incredible. He's past 8, right? So you can see just like hitting on Justin Herbert has single-handedly saved Tom Telesco's career. And so this is WAR above expectation, right? You can see like the top teams: Chargers, Browns, Patriots. But like you have this one triangle here, and then you have a bunch of dots around kind of like the median of like all NFL teams, which is like you don't really want that. And then you go here, which is the Chargers, or this is total WAR gained by players drafted over since 2019, including quarterbacks, right? And you can see how Justin Herbert has single-handedly carried the last 2 or 3 drafts for the Chargers because they rank number 1 in total WAR generated since 2019, right? Like it's absolutely incredible what Justin Herbert has done as quarterback for the Chargers in his first 2 years. He's only going to keep getting better, but you have to admit, hitting on Justin Herbert and not even hitting on Justin, it's not even hitting. Tom Telesco just making the simple move to draft Justin Herbert has kept him as the GM for the Chargers for at least the next 2, maybe 3 years, depending on how successful they are going forward. Before I go on to my next before I just go on to my next thing about the draft, I also want to point out, like, I've thought about this a lot because last offseason I was actually, higher on Telesco than most. I thought, he handled the salary cap well. The salary, like, we were never in a bad situation cap wise. I never really thought his drafts went super well, but he hit on his first round picks. But I've come to realize, like, Telesco is, like, in the first round has just made the obvious selection. Like, there's nothing, like, this is not me trying to like bash on him, but like, there's nothing like super impressive about selecting Justin Herbert at 6. The Chargers needed a quarterback. The Dolphins made the decision for the Chargers on who they were going to get, and the Chargers got Herbert. Derwin James falling to 17, like, that's the obvious pick. Derwin James was a top 10, top 5 talent, except for injuries. And because he fell to 17, Telesco just made the easy choice. Now, yeah, he had to make a choice whether or not he wanted to factor in the injury concerns and stuff, but he made the obvious choice. Rashawn Slater was a borderline top 5 talent in last year's draft, if we're excluding like positional value and stuff, right? Because quarterbacks obviously hold more precedent. And some people like Daniel Jeremiah had Slater as the best offensive tackle in the draft, and he fell to 13. Like, Telesco just has been making the obvious choice. And again, you have to make that choice. Like, maybe he overthinks it and like, oh, why is he slipping? Like, maybe I don't want in on this. He's made the obvious choice. Like, that's good in itself, but it hasn't been particularly impressive, because if we go to my next point, which is the Anthony Lynn era of drafts, plus just like considering what Telesco has done outside of the first round, it's awful. It's awful. Like, let's just quickly run through all the draft picks of the Anthony Lynn era. Mike Williams, hit. Forrest Lamp, Dan Feeney, miss. Rayshon Jenkins, hit, I guess, because he started 2 seasons and he caught a bag. Desmond King, yeah, he had an all per year, but he got traded before his rookie contract was over. Miss. Sam Tevye, miss. Isaac Rochelle, miss. Derwin James, hit, but like he's been injured for like 2 or like 1.5 seasons, like full seasons. And like, I don't know. That's a tough one. I still think Derwin James is a hit. Obviously, that's the best safety in the league, but that's tough. Nwosu, one semi-decent year this year, but like he hasn't really like broken out as a second round pick as you'd hope. So I'm going to just say neutral. Justin Jones, miss. Kaiser White, big year this year, so neutral. Quesenberry, neutral. Cantrell, cut after training camp of his rookie year, miss. Justin Jackson, miss. Neutral, I guess. But like, no, Derwin James and Mike Williams are the only hits, and both are first rounders. Keep that in mind. Tillery, miss. Adderley, neutral. Pipkins, miss. Tranquil, neutral. Stick, neutral. Egbule, miss. Bronson, miss. Right? Like, I understand like miss is like, it might be too strong, especially for the 6th and 7th round picks. But like, I'll get to that in a second, because when you get to the later rounds, it's all dart throws, right? You're just throwing a dart on the draft board and saying, maybe this guy turns into a starter for us. But like, there have been hits in the 6th and 7th round. Cameron Curl for the Washington Commanders. Jordan Fuller. Jordan Fuller is like the name everyone uses now when they say, oh, you can hit on 6th and 7th round picks, because it is possible. 2020, Justin Herbert, massive hit. Kenneth Murray. The Chargers trading up from the 2nd round to the 1st round to draft Kenneth Murray might single-handedly be the worst draft move of the past 20 years. You don't trade up in the 1st round for a non-QB. That's my opinion. You don't trade up for a linebacker, period. Kenneth Murray does not and will, like, no linebacker, unless they turn out to be Fred Warner and Bobby Wagner, which you have no idea of before the draft. No linebacker is going to move the needle that much. No one. And it's absolutely, like, might be the biggest miss of Telesco's career. But I'm also going to give some benefit of the doubt that drafting is a mutual process, that Telesco and Anthony Lynn both had says in who they wanted to draft. And Kenneth Murray wasn't all Telesco, but it probably also wasn't all Lynn. And like, Telesco is probably the one who picked up the phone and called Belichick and say, hey, Bill, we want to move up from 37 to 23. Let's make a move, right? Like, it's a mutual process. I'm not going to just give all the blame to Telesco for drafting Kenneth Murray, because we all know that, like, post-draft, they put out the draft videos, Anthony Lynn really liked Kenneth Murray, but to trade up in the 1st round to draft him is just an abomination, right? Joshua Kelly missed, Joe Reed missed, Gilman neutral, I guess, because he played a little bit this year, but he only has 1 pick. And then KJ Hill miss. Slater hit, Asante hit, Palmer looking like a hit, McKitty neutral trending towards hit, Rumpf looks like a miss, Jaimez neutral, Neiman neutral, Roundtree 36 carries, 87 yards, incredible miss. Mark Webb neutral, right? So you can see the only non-1st round picks I at least gave a hit to were Josh Palmer, and I like, that's it. Like, Kaiser White, I guess, but he's been hurt. Desmond King was an obvious hit until he got traded. Rayshon Jenkins, probably, yeah, I said Rayshon's a hit. So it's Rayshon and Josh Palmer as the only non-1st round hits. And like, that's just, you don't win that way. You can't win by not hitting on 3rd round picks, because these picks mean you get good players on cheap deals. But if you're not drafting the good players, you're not going to be able to maximize that type of window that you get with that player. So now the next topic I wanted to talk about is the draft, right? Like, there's 2 aspects to the draft, or not the draft, the trades. So there's 2 aspects of trades I wanted to talk about. Number 1, Tom Telesco in his tenure has traded down a number of 0 times. He has 0 trade downs in his career. And this is not just talking about trading down in the 1st round. This is talking about trading down, period. Like, this is a huge problem, not only with the Chargers, but with NFL teams. Teams tend to overvalue their draft picks in the sense that, like, they think they know so much about the draft when in reality they don't. The hit rate on draft picks is so low. That's why teams why drafting is so hard, because you know nothing about college prospects. If it was easy, then every team would be just drafting the good players, right? Like, the undrafted players would never go undrafted, and the players that shouldn't have got drafted won't get drafted. But that doesn't happen. So teams tend to overvalue draft picks. So once you get into rounds 3 through 7, they're all dart throws. They're all just, okay, pick this up, throw it at the draft board, and that's the same probability that you're gonna have a hit as compared to, like, actually, like, doing your prep work. And this is not saying that scouts' opinions and GM opinions and draft reports are all invalid. This is just saying that you can't think that your opinion is right, or you can think your opinion is right, but you can't truly believe that this guy is going to be like that much of a hit that you don't take the extra picks. Like trading down in the later rounds gives you more dart throws, which gives you a higher rate of hitting on a guy that turns out to be great or good, at least, on a cheap deal. But when you don't have as many of those dart throws as someone else, you're not going to be able to get those guys on cheap deals, and you're not going to be able to find good or better players, right? And that's the issue where, like, it's not even trading down in the first round or trade, like, you have to garner more draft picks in the later rounds, because that's how you find a Jordan Fuller. That's how you find a Cameron Curl. And that's not how you end up with Larry Roundtree and Alohi Gilman and who was in the 2020, or it was Alohi Gilman in 2020, right? And then like Emeka Egbule, like that's what you end up with when you don't accumulate more picks, right? So now the Chargers have moved towards being an analytically minded organization, which is great. They have 2 guys in their analytics department. I think that should expand a little bit, in the next coming years. Staley's obviously a data-driven guy. I know he understands the value of draft picks, but there's just a I'm gonna quote Moneyball. I'm just trying to remember the saying. Like, there's a inefficiency or market deficiency in overvaluing draft picks, and I think Tom Telesco definitely falls in that spectrum. The other aspect of trades, and I'm sorry if this is going super long, but the other aspect of trades that I think people have harped on Tom Telesco on is, like, he doesn't really make a lot of like in-season free agent not free agent acquisitions. He doesn't really make a lot of like in-season moves. Now, I was on the train of not trading for Akeem Hicks for a little bit, and like not trading for anyone who could have helped the team. And part of that is because going all in is such a risky move. And look, I understand what the Rams did. The Rams are a team that just completely destroyed the Nerds this year. Like, the Nerds all were predicting the Rams to eventually come crashing down. Stafford was going to come crashing down. They didn't. They won the Super Bowl because they went all in on Matthew Stafford. They went all in with Von Miller, and they went all in with Odell. Will that work for every team? No. And that's the problem. I think the Rams exploited a market inefficiency in a year where exploiting that inefficiency was needed. There were no elite teams in 2021. Like, let's be real. Like, the Chiefs, we knew that their offense was struggling early on. They got back on track, but like, that team wasn't as good as 2018 or 2019, right? The Bills, for how good their like offense was, losing Tre'Davious White, that's not an elite defense anymore, right? The Bucks, the Packers, the Rams, the Niners, the Cowboys, they all had weaknesses that didn't make them elite. So you have a season with 0 elite teams, and going all in was the right move obviously in hindsight, but like, going all in a year where there's 0 elite teams is how you win the Super Bowl. But going all in, like, for a team like the Chargers, I still don't know if getting Akeem Hicks moves the needle that much. If Akeem Hicks makes the Chargers at least make the playoffs, like, we just don't know that. There's just too many unknowns with football, small sample sizes. And just because the Rams succeeded doing it doesn't mean it's going to happen to the Chargers, right? That's the thing. Like, just because something happened on team A, that if team B does it the exact same way, it may or may not work. Now, I think going back to my like teams overvalue draft picks, that also goes back to making these type of trades. Like, the Chargers, I don't think the Chargers should be hesitating to trade away their first or second round pick in this draft or the next draft for an elite or Hall of Fame type player, right? Because what are the odds that the draft pick is going to be better than this Hall of Fame or Pro Bowl or All Pro type player, right? Like, especially at pick 17, like, the hit rate is so much lower as you get further in the first round. And I'm pretty sure, and you guys can, comment if I'm wrong, or one of Steve and Alex Tyler can comment if I'm wrong on this, but like, I think teams only have 15 to 18 players where they have a first round grade on. And after that, it's just like, these guys are like potential starters down the road. So like, at pick 17, like, what are the odds that pick, you're going to have a first round grade on that player, and he's going to like make a huge impact in year 1? Because years 3, 4, and 5 on Herbert's contract, you got to go all in. Like, Tom Telesco, this has to be the year he spends all his cap. There should be probably very little rollover cap into year 4 of Herbert's deal. If you can trade for an elite player, like you make that trade, you do what the Rams did, but not go overboard with it, because all it takes, right? All it takes is one injury. All it takes is something bad to happen for this all-in approach to just completely go under the water. And we've seen this type of all-in approach fail, like in other sports, right? Like super teams are formed to go all in. And, you know, LeBron James's Heat only won 2 rings in 4 championships. Now, I'm saying only because that's stupid, but it's stupid to say 2 of 4 rings is bad. But you can see like going all in won't work every single year. The Rams did it this year. That doesn't mean they're going to win the Super Bowl next year. But I think that team did a great job of finding that the league was weaker this year and saying, if there's ever a chance for us to pull away, it's this year. And that's what they did. So that's kind of like my 2 cents on like Tom Telesco not really trading for players and not being super aggressive, where it's like, how much are those players going to move the needle? And if you trade for Akeem Hicks in you know, the during midseason before the trade deadline, you're giving up a pick, and you're going to probably have to extend him after the season's over, instead of just, you know, getting him on a contract in free agency. I just that was such a tough period to evaluate, and I think hindsight obviously makes things look much worse for Telesco, especially with how the Rams finished. But the last thing I wanted to talk about before I end this very long video is, you know, the cap space. I know this table might be a little bit small. I'm sorry for that, but I'll expand it. You probably have seen this table before. This is looking at like off-season resources and how well the Chargers stack up to everyone else. So per my calculations and my off-season composite score, the Chargers have the 4th most off-season resources, which is amazing. This is one of Telesco's strengths, right? I know I've kind of harped on Telesco and a couple of the negatives he's had all video, but this is one of his biggest strengths, which is keeping the Chargers in a great situation financially and in terms of how many resources they have. They rank 2nd in terms of effective cap space, right? Like they have the 97th. They're in the 97th percentile of effective cap space, which pretty much means they have the 2nd most effective cap space behind the Dolphins, right? Who also has a quarterback on a rookie contract. They rank in the 67th, 68th percentile in draft capital per the Fitzgerald Spielberger draft value chart. So you can see like Telesco, and this is one of his strengths, just keeping the cap in a good situation, keeping them under the cap, and always, you know, in a situation where they can spend money. I'm not saying his free agent signings have wowed me or he's hit it out of the park, right? Like Chris Harris Jr. and Balaga in 2020 looked like steals. They didn't really pan out. Like 2021 was much better, right? Lindsley, Ibushi, Filer, and Jared Cook was pretty solid for how much we got him for. I think Telesco does a good job in free agency of plugging holes and going to the draft with a best player available strategy. So free agency is I would say one of his somewhat strengths. I do think he should be a little bit more aggressive this year, be willing to pay up for players that can significantly move the needle on defense or on offense. But that's just not really how he's operated. He's been more conservative, taking deals that give value rather than overpaying for a player who may be worth it at the end of the day, but he doesn't really take as many chances as other GMs like Les Snead or like Steve Kine, right? So that's going to be all about Tom Telesco that I'm going to talk about today. This was a super long video. If you made it to the end, I really appreciate it. Just to kind of recap, right? Like Tom Telesco and the 3 aspects of a GM what a GM does. He hasn't been good at drafting, especially in the Anthony Lynn era, as we saw with some of the graphs that I had up on my screen. In terms of trades, he's never traded down, which is the bad thing. He's traded up for a running back, Melvin Gordon, in the 1st round in 2015, and he traded up for an off-ball linebacker in Kenneth Murray in 2020. Just awful, completely anti-analytics moves that he's made, which, you know, it's just not going to work out in the long run. Need to see him trade down a little bit more, hopefully in the draft, or at least in the 1st round would be great. In the later rounds would be great also. Just need to see him make some moves there. And in terms of trading for players, we talked a little bit about how he hasn't really traded a lot for players, but that's because maybe there wasn't like a down year for teams or a down year for him to go kind of make that all-in approach. And finally, free agency, that's just strong suit. Always keeps the Chargers in a great situation. Definitely one of the reasons why, he's still kept his job, because he's always given the Chargers flexibility in terms of free agency to bring in guys or keep some of the guys that they have. So again, if you made it this far, I really appreciate it. And with that, as always, bolt up.